Cascade earrings. And they're going to be featuring a 10mm Potomac Crystal Rivoli, and I'm using those in the Magic Wine color. And then in addition to the 10mm Rivoli, it's going to be using our exclusive Iris Duo beads. If you need any of the materials to do these Cascade earrings, below the video is a little date stamp that says when the video was produced, and there has a little Show More button there. You can click on the Show More button and it will have links to all of these different products if you do want to purchase them from me online. For the Cascade earrings, again, we're using that 10mm Rivoli. We are going to be using the Iris Duo beads. Each of the earrings for the Iris Duos are going to be using 8 of the Iris Duos, and I'm using them in the Vintage Copper color. So the Vintage Copper Iris Duos, 8 for each earring, so you're going to need 16 in total. In addition to that, we're doing simply 15s and 11O seed beads. The 15s I'm going to use are the galvanized gold color, and then the 11Os is the matte metallic green iris, and they're a nice kind of foresty green color. They look kind of like a cascading leaf. This also is an idea that you can use it as a bracelet and do a leaf on the other side of the Rivoli as well, but I'll just be showing you how to do the earrings. The earrings are going to be strung using size 12 needles and 0.006 wildfire beading thread in the green color. We are going to start out with 2 needles and then we'll kind of downgrade into 1 needle. So you want to have 2 needles handy for the start of it. I'm going to be showing how to bezel in the back of the earring with an actual post, the bail post here, or the glue-in post for them in surgical steel. If you want to, you can follow along there, or I'll also show you how to just make a little loop if you want to hang them on a fish hook. So whatever type of ear wire you want to use is what you're going to want to have handy when you start the video. I also have a thread zap here, or a thread burner, and that's going to be used to burn down the thread or the cord at the very ends, as well as to get it off the actual spool. Likewise, I like to have a bent needle nose pliers handy, and the bent needle nose pliers are going to be used to squash the end of the thread to make it easier to thread the needle when you're working with it. It's also a good idea to have a nice workable surface. This is just a bead mat here, but you can have a bead on it board or something to work along with. That way you can have a nice efficient workspace and make yourself a more efficient and faster beader. To start the Cascade earrings, I want you to get ready with your beads in little piles, and also get ready with about 3.5 feet to 4 feet of beading thread with a size 12 needle on each end of the beading thread. We're going to start our way at the bottom and kind of work our way up into our Rivoli bezel. To start out the Cascade earrings, you want to again have your needle ready with a needle on either end, so 2 needles, 1 on each end of your 4 feet of your beading thread. We're going to be working with the Iris Duos and getting them in place before we go ahead and make our peyote bezel for our Rivoli. To work with the Iris Duos, if you have not before, they're flat on one side and rounded on the other side. We're going to be working so that the rounded side is facing up, and that way you'll know and be able to keep track of your project. The first thing to do is taking either your right needle or your left needle. You're going to put 7 15-Os onto the bottom of the thread. Let that fall back to the middle of the thread, which is going to be at the bottom of our Iris Duo. Here we're going to start a interweaving where the right needle is going to go to the left and the left needle is going to go to the right. We're going to go through the bottom hole of the Iris Duo with the rounded edge facing up and crisscross our thread through the Iris Duo. You want to pull your needles to make sure that you have the same amount of thread on both sides of the Iris Duo. Once you make sure that your thread is even, we're going to go ahead and progress and cascade up the earrings. Going up now, we're going to go from the first hole basically here to the second hole of the project. To jump to the second hole and connect to the second hole, we're actually going to be jumping up to the first hole of another set of our Iris Duos. To do so, we're going to add another 7 seed beads. These, we're working with the 15-Os to start. Going to add another 7 15s on the right needle, and then another 7 15s on the left. If you need to, you can sit the needle down, because usually you're one hand dominant and you're going to be faster in one hand than the other. Once you have your 7 beads on, let them drop down to your central iris duo here on either side. From here, you're going to pick up with your right needle another iris duo, an 11-0, sew through the top hole of the iris duo already there, add an 11-0 and another iris duo. Pull that threaded needle then the whole way through, and that right needle is going to come out the left side. With the needle on the left now, go through all of those beads as well in the opposite direction, so it's coming out on the right side. So as we add each progression of our iris duo, it is going to be adding the right needle and the left needle are going to be switching positions. From here, we're going to jump up to our next row, adding in 2 more iris duos and connecting these central iris duos, kind of bringing them more into that cascade. Again, our count is 7. So we're going to add in 7 more 15s on the sides here. And whatever you do on the right-hand side gets mimicked on the left-hand side. I'm going to pick up my next iris duo, again, going from the right side towards the left side through the bottom hole of the iris duo. Add an 11-0 onto your needle. Sew through the top hole of the iris duo from the row before. Instead of adding another iris duo, add an 11-0, sew through the other iris duo, out towards the left. And then as you have that, you're going to go in and add your last iris duo on this side with an 11-0 before it. So the 11-0s are always going to be piecing the project together, basically. Give a nice tight pull, and that gets your next row of the cascade in place. From here, grab the left needle, mimic it, and add your 7 seed beads. And once you have your 7 seed beads in place, you're going to take that needle from the left-hand side, retrace exactly what you just did, and go to the right-hand side. Give a nice tight pull, and that's going to pull them in together. And here on the side, by accident, I just realized I added an 11-0, so I'm going to take this left needle back out, take the 11-0 off, and we're going to give a nice tight pull and get ready to add our final 3 of our iris duos in place to finish up the bottom of that cascade earring. For the next layer here, we're going to do the exact same thing, adding in our 7 seed beads on the side. And once you have your 7 seed beads, it's time to put on an iris duo, again through the bottom hole. I'm with my right needle right now, so I'm going to go from the right to the left. Put on the iris duo, and then an 11-0 seed bead. Sew through the iris duo that's already there from the layer below. Add an 11-0 and another iris duo to sit in the middle. An 11-0. Sew through the iris duo that's already there. Give a nice tight pull to bring that cascade effect to fruition. On the side then here, I'm going to sit down the needle that's now coming out on the left, and the needle that's currently on the left-hand side. We're going to add those 7 seed beads, and on the side here. To finish up the left, we're going to add 1 more seed bead, and our last of our iris duo beads. Let that sit there. Needle on the left then gets our 7 15s, just like we've been doing. And after those 7 15s are in place, you're going to go back up to the top to that row that you just completed and sew back through all of your beads. So once you have the iris duos in place and that track kind of created, it's easy to go back through after adding your 7 beads on the side. Give a nice tight pull and that gets that nice cascade effect in place. At this point here, we're going to go up and we're not adding any more iris duos because we're finished with the iris duos, but we are going to add some seed beads. The needle that's on the left here, we are going to be adding 5 of our 15 O's onto the needle, and then instead of adding any of our iris duos because we're done with them, we're going to sew through the top hole of the iris duos, and we're going to separate out the iris duo holes with 2 of our 11O seed beads. So adding 2, sew through, add 2 more, and sew through, exiting the left-hand side of the uppermost row of iris duos. On the left, mimicking again, 5 seed beads, go on, and then after the 5 11Os are on, or the 5 15Os rather are on, I want you to sew back through to the opposite side, just like we've been doing, making sure when you come out the opposite side, because those 15s are already there, that you are not sewing through any of the 15Os and your needle is coming out right at the end. Give a nice tight pull then with each of those, and that's going to get your leaf. You can also use this kind of leaf style to make something your own, adding another iris duo in at the top and not doing a Rivoli. That's kind of up to you, but it's a nice simple leaf style, stringing back and forth. From here, we're going to be adding in and creating basically our peyote bezel along the back to actually secure our Rivoli in place. To do so, we're going to add in some 11Os, and then we're going to bezel with our 15Os after creating that nice little bezeling shape. To start, we are going to be just letting one of our needles, so the left-hand needle, I'm going to let hang off to the side right now, and we're just going to be working with the right, adding in some of those 11O seed beads. Our next step is getting 16 of our 11O seed beads onto our cascading leaf here. To do so, I took the right needle coming right out after the iris duo and added 16 of the 11Os onto the needle. Once you have those 16 on the needle, we're going to spin them around to create our loop. To do so, go back to the iris duo here on the opposite side and sew through the entire last row that we just came out of. That's going to bring it around kind of in an arch and reinforce that little loop that we're doing. So we're going through here, arching it through, and creating. As I come out now, I'm going to create my bezel. So one of these needles I'm going to keep for the back. Right now we're going to work on the front of the bezel. To work on the front of the bezel, we're going to be adding in 15 O's in a peyote stitch style between the 11 O's. If you're not familiar with peyote, you may want to watch one of the peyote videos before trying to go in and create the peyote bezel. You're going to sew through an 11O, and as you're coming out the 11O, add a 15O on your needle, skip one of the 11Os in that row of 16, and go through the next one in line. With your thread and needle coming out the third bead, add a 15, skip the fourth bead, and sew through the fifth bead. Again, skip the sixth bead, add a 15, and go through the seventh bead. So you're always adding in on the alternate or the odd number, adding in a 15, skipping a bead, and then sewing through the next one in place. You're going to continue this peyote stitch the whole way around the loop here, adding in 8 of your 15Os. So we're adding in our 8 15O seed beads around the loop here. And as you come to the end then, we're going to go back and create a little bit more of the bezel. So I have my beads in place here. I'm sorry, it's 7 rather than 8. I have my 7 beads in place here, and that's going to be the start of that interior bezel. That can also be the start of the back too. As you learn peyote bezeling, you'll understand that some goes to the back and some goes to the front. From here, I need to make little V's above my iris duos that I'm working with in order to kind of trap in and create the bezel. Taking the thread and needle through the last of the seed beads, I'm going to go through a seed bead and come out the iris duo. From here, I want to add 5 15s onto my needle after coming out the Iris Duo. And I'm going to sew through the Iris Duo again in a circular form, which is going to force those 5 15s to kind of sit right above the Iris Duo. From here, sew through the 2 11s that are below, sew through the Iris Duo, and then add your 5 of your 15s here again. After you add your 5 15s, you need to sew through that top hole of the Iris Duo, circling again, through the seed beads, and come out the next Iris Duo, adding 5 as well. So after coming through those 2 11-0s, you're going to come out the last Iris Duo and do your grouping here of your 5 seed beads. You can see those 5 seed beads almost sit kind of like in a crown above the Iris Duos, and we're going to be pulling them back into place in order to hold in our actual Rivoli. To progress and to get the front of it done, you're going to sew through then, after coming out the Iris Duo, sew through the first of your green 11-0s as well as the first of your 15-0. We're going to do another row of the peyote stitch, which is going to bring the beads in towards one another to create that front bezel. In the peyote stitch, you're going to add a 15 and sew through a 15. Add another 15, sew through. So you're going to constantly be adding a 15 and then sew through the gold 15 that's sticking up. When you're doing this, you can see that you don't need to pull tightly until you kind of finish your row here. And once I finish my row then here, I'm going to give a nice tight grab. And when you pull tightly, it starts to rotate inward. And you can see then, I'll kind of poke the Rivoli back there, it's going to sit and pull towards the front. From here, we're going to go in and actually connect to our 5 beads that are along our Iris Duos. When you're connecting to the 5 beads here, we are going to add 1 seed bead before our grouping of our first 5 and then 3 between. So I'm going to add 1 15. The grouping of 5, you're going to sew through the 3rd bead in line, which is kind of grouping and doing a netting bezel. Add 3 more 15s. Pick up the middle grouping of 5, sewing through the 3rd bead, which sewing through the 3rd bead is going to give you that little point. Add 3 more 15s, sew through the 3rd 5 there, add 1 more 15, and connect to your bezel. At this point, once you give that nice kind of pull, you can see that that front bezel section is completed. And as we add in the back beads now, it will actually encapsulate and hold the bezel in place. I'm going to leave the needle and thread that I'm working with here on the right hand side just hang out in place, and I'm going to use the thread in the back here that I had still on the project to do more of my bezeling along the back. The bezeling along the back is going to be the exact same that we're starting out with our peyote stitch, adding in our sewing through our first 11, adding a 15, sewing into the 3rd 11, and so forth, adding a 15, sewing through the 5th 11. So the whole way around, adding in, skipping a bead, and sewing through. I'm sewing through, adding, and getting those 7 beads in place. As you come out then, that peyote stitch, after adding our last bead in place, I'm going to come out the 11-0 seed bead here. And we're basically going to be mimicking the front. So just like we did in the front here, we're going to be doing a simpler catch on the bezel. So we're going to go in here. You're going to sew on 5 seed beads. And after you sew through the 5 seed beads, you're going to grab your Iris Duo. So we're not going through the 11s at all. You have your 5 seed beads. Grab the Iris Duo through the top hole of the central Iris Duo bead and sew through. You can see we're just doing that. That's going to bring those 15s kind of right across that iris duo. From here, we're going to add 5 more of our seed beads. And after you add those 5, sew through the first hole of the next kind of iris duo you're skipping over, sewing through that first hole of the 11-0. And then out the first of the 15. So that's how we're going to step up. So you can see then that's going to put 5 seed beads on either side of the iris duo bead. We also now have our step up that we're going to add our next row of our peyote stitch. Before doing so, you kind of want to push your crystal in place, and that's going to give us our little bezel set to pop our bead in. You don't have to worry about it too much because we still have to finish off the front. But from here, you can kind of set it off to the side if you want. We're going to go around one more time, just like we did along the front, and add in our second row of our bezel. So you're adding in here your second row of your bezel of your 15s along the back. So I'm picking up a 15, sewing through a 15. Picking up a 15, sewing through. I'm doing this the whole way around that bezel. Then what we'll do is we'll get the bezel in the back nice and tight and flip over, drop the crystal in, and get that nice and tight as well. As you come out the last of your bezel here, we're going to catch on to these 15, or to the 5 15s here along the bottom. Give a nice tight pull to pull that bezel rounded along the top here. You're going to sew through the first 4 of the seed beads out of that grouping of 5. Bring your needle out, add 3 more 15s, skip the first bead and sew through the grouping of 4. That's going to create a little arch over top of and create a nice secure backing for us to lay our crystal inside of. From here, I'm going to progress to the next row basically of my peyote stitch, stepping through the first gold bead and then the first one in the row that I just completed. Give a nice tight pull and flip over to the front of the project. Let that needle and thread hang out along the back. Grab your Rivoli. You're going to kind of pop it down in the front there. When I pop it down in the front, I want to pull along the back, pull along the front. And as I pull there along the back, we're going to sew along this whole back line one more time. When I sew along the back line, I'm not going to be adding any beads. I'm just sewing through the 15s that are on the outermost edge. So you're sewing through those 7 15s, which are going to pull them in even closer towards one another. So you're sewing right along the back through those 15s. And then as you get to the front section here, or the bottom section, you're going to sew through that innermost edge. This is going to pull that bezel in nice and tight, so when you pop your crystal in, it can't escape. And sew through that inner line. Sewing through the 4 beads, the 3 that you added, and the 4 beads as well. That tightens it up and makes that nice and closed off, so that when we go back now and finish up the front, our Rivoli will sit nicely in place and stay. From here now we're going to do the front till we go back to the back, and I show you either how to close off the back or how to go in and actually do your bezeling around your posts if you want to do that. And I have 2 different examples sitting here just to show you kind of the difference that you can get in some of those magic coated Rivolis. Here along the front then, after you have your little bezel set and your 15s kind of hanging out there, we are going to run through doing 1 more row of our 15s. Going along here, adding a 15, catching and pulling in nice and tight. Add a 15, catch, pull in nice and tight. this is going to complete the front of the Rivoli and bring the beads in nice and tight. Because we're using the green thread too, as we go around the last row and do the same thing in the peyote stitch, but not add any beads, we are going to be able to conceal the thread really, really easily. When you get to the bottom portion here, you're going to sew back through all of those beads that you have along the bottom. The beads that you have along the bottom are going to be the beads that we use to separate the 3 beads to connect the V's through that central bead at the middle of the iris duo and up along right over to the peyote stitch. With your fingers, just kind of give a nice pull, round out your seed beads along your bezel, and then sew through the innermost bezel line of your 15s, not adding any 15s. Again, what this is going to do is just kind of pull your netting in place and get it nice and tight along the edge of the Rivoli, because you want to try to keep most of the Rivoli exposed so you get that nice kind of glittery shine. At this point, after pulling in and getting that nice and tight at the front is actually completed. I'm going to take my thread and needle to reinforce around that inner loop one more time, pull nice and tightly in around my Rivoli, and then we're going to flip over along the back, pull in tightly along the back so the Rivoli sits nice and in place along the back as well. And we're going to go ahead and I'll show you how we're going to attach our ear wires. Once you're done reinforcing the front line here, we're going to get rid of that front thread because we still have the back to kind of close off. Push that back thread to the back. And then with the front thread, I'm going to take my thread and needle and go back along the outer edge here towards the green beads. Once I'm at the green beads, I'm going to sew underneath. And the reason I'm picking the green 11-ohs is just because my thread is green, so it's going to hide it really well. I'm going to make a loop sewing underneath the bridge thread, which is the thread that connects those 11-ohs to the 15-ohs. Make a loop and sew a knot through it once and then twice, making sure that's in position that you won't see it. I'm going to pull nice and tight, push in, and then we're going to get rid of that first thread, leaving about 1/8 of an inch here, burning down, and then taking that edge of the thread and my burner and burning it down flush against the project. Then because the green matches green, you're not going to see it. Did the same thing on the sample one as well. So when we go in now to do our back section, we're flipping over to the back, and you have the option, like I had stated, if you want to do some wire along the top and then just do a fish hook, you can use some 24 gauge wire, go along the middle 11-oh row and get that lock in, or get that wire in there and create the clasp. What I'm going to be showing you how to do, if you want to, is position the ear wire down at the base of the Rivoli and have it nice that you can put nice as a post on your ear so it's not too heavy to hang down. Like I said before, you can do this, you don't have to do it, it's kind of up to you. So as we work around now and we're coming back around to the back of the project, we're going to go ahead and basically continue our peyote stitch. I have the peyote and I'm going to sew through my last 15-oh bead, and I'm going to continue the peyote stitch along the 15s at the bottom, picking up a seed bead, skipping one, and sewing through. So that central line, I'm going to be adding the peyote beads along the base. So before, as we came to the back here, we just sewed right along the line here, and now we're going to be adding in the peyote stitch. It's going to be a little tricky to kind of make your needle go between your beads. Usually what I do is kind of push it down away from the project, and that makes it easier to handle. As you're doing your peyote stitch, also you want to push the beads that you're adding, the 15s, towards the center of the back of the Rivoli. Adding a bead, skipping a bead, and sewing through. Because the Rivoli has a pointed back, you are going to have an unflat surface for that ear wire to sit on. We're going to make up for that by pushing it down towards the base of the earring. As you come along then and adding your last of your 15 O's along the outer edge, I'm jumping from the bottom outer edge then towards my peyote stitch along the Rivoli top, and then I'm going to continue on after stepping up, just adding in my next row of my peyote stitch. When I add in the next row of the peyote stitch, I'm adding in my 15s, and the 15s then that I'm adding in, I'm going to add in right along the top of the row here and continuing around. So you're adding a 15 in, and it's going to kind of close in on the peyote stitch. As I go around, I'm adding 1 for 1 bead, meaning I'm not decreasing my peyote at all. Right now, my beads are sitting just in a regular peyote stitch. And I'm adding 1 bead in between each of the 15s already there. As you come around to the end of the peyote stitch then, I'm going to sew in and continue on with the row, pushing those beads towards the center. When I get down to the bottom now, what I'm going to do is I'm along the bottom line that I added, I'm adding 1 seed bead, 1 15, and sewing through 2 of the 15 sitting up. Add 1 seed bead, and instead of sewing through 1 15, sew through 2. What that's going to do is bring that peyote stitch in and decrease. Add 1 15 and sew through 2 15s. Again, add 1, sew through 2. And this is kind of going the whole way around there. One more time, add 1, sew through 2. And give a nice tight pull, and that's going to pull that peyote stitch right in there nice and tightly. It also is going to push that Rivoli out towards the front. At this point here, you have a little bit of an opening, and we are going to slide our earring finding right in there towards the bottom. So it's going to slide right around that V area, right there, kind of resting on the bottom. Right in the middle. You want to make sure to line your ear wire up with your Iris Duo. From here, I'm going to continue around in that circle, adding 1, sewing through 2 beads. And I'm holding the ear wire in place right now, but I'm not really going to worry about pulling it exactly into place yet. After sewing through 2 beads, I add another 15. And sew through the 2 pieces of peyote that are sticking up. There's 1, and here's 2. Give a nice tight pull, add another 15, sew through 1, sew through 2, and give a tight pull. This is going to close the seed beads around the ear wire. You can see I just gave a nice little push on the ear wire to close it up even more. From here again, add 1, sew through 1 and 2, and I'm going to go straight along the back now because it's kind of laying along the back, sewing through actually a 3rd bead and pulling that thread in. Add a bead, sew through 2, add a bead, sew through 1, and that's going to pretty much close it up. From here, what I want you to do is sew through the innermost beads, which is going to be the kind of 4 or so that are sitting nice and tight in, and that's going to close your thread the whole way around the ear wire. And there's no real right or wrong way to do this. You just want to make sure that you're kind of closing up that peyote. After you close up the peyote, you want to bring your thread and needle over to an area where you can see a bridge thread, which I have the perfect place right there. I'm going to sew underneath the bridge thread. Sew through that loop that I just made once. Make the loop a little smaller. Sew through that loop a second time, making a nice sewer's knot. From there, take my thread burner, go in, do that same thing, leaving a little bit like 1/8 of an inch. Go in then with my thread burner and thread that wire, or burn that wire nice and flush against the project. At this point then, your nice cascade earrings are completed. You have the nice ear wires kind of bezeled in there. That way you know that they're secure. They're not going to come out. You can see the color variants in the different kind of magic wines, and I like the play off them, that they both cast that pink and the green in the different colors of that cascading flower or cascading leaf. If you want to, you can also take your thread and needles and kind of reinforce the edges. But you get a nice pair there of kind of dressy posts. I like the look of them and have that kind of, you know, beautiful floral look to them. As always, if you need any of the materials to do these Rivoli set cascade earrings, you can go back to the beginning of the video. At the beginning of the video, there's the little date stamp and the links, or the I in the top right-hand corner will give you information, as well as me kind of reading it all off to you as on the beginning of the video as well. If you like this video, you can also subscribe to this YouTube channel to get regular updates and ideas and videos that we produce for you. You can also stay connected with me on Facebook and Instagram. You can join our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. It's a great forum there with people that are really excited about making jewelry. Super helpful, super positive, giving great ideas as well. So check that out and get involved there as well. If, again, you get the inspiration, check out and show me what you do, kind of overlapping just to show you. You could do a design where that has those leaves or those petals, also sewing them together for a nice brooch or a nice design. You can have fun kind of creating and playing on these fun cascade earrings. As always, thank you so much for watching, and have fun creating